Hey man, I told you, we're going to use this article for topics. Let's talk about this one article that we've already pulled 3 video commentary discussions from. This is Rory Boylen's article on Sportsnet, one off-season trade candidate for each of the 31 NHL teams. The one we're talking about here today is probably the biggest star out of all the trade ideas we have discussed thus far. It is for the Calgary Flames, who Rory Boylen labels as the Calgary Flames' potential trade in the off-season this year is none other than Johnny Gaudreau. Now, that's not a surprise, you know that from the title, from the thumbnail, that's why you clicked on this video, but let's go over what Rory Boylen has to say about the small, young, near 100-point scorer in the National Hockey League. It was believed that if the Calgary Flames disappointed in the playoffs in 2020, GM Brad Treliving may do something big to change up the core of the team. Gaudreau's name was at the top of the list alongside Sean Monahan, and if there was a time to entertain a Gaudreau trade, it would be this offseason, since an acquiring team would be picking up 2 contract years before he becomes a UFA. Treliving has never been shy of a big trade either, but the fact this season was interrupted could change all of that. We'll see. Now, this article was indeed published back on May 12th, so it has been a month. The NHL's return to play plan, the play-in series, the playoffs, that wasn't in place the way it is now. Certainly, right now, the way the Calgary Flames are facing off against the Winnipeg Jets in the play-in series could change off this idea. But let's go with the assumption that the Calgary Flames lose. And not just lose, let's say they lose badly. They get swept, 3 games, 3 losses. All of a sudden, the Calgary Flames are out of the playoffs. They're out of the play-in rounds. Johnny Gaudreau gets 0 points. Let's say that's the worst case scenario. I'm putting this out here immediately before we get into the discussion. Do you think Johnny Gaudreau will be on the trade block? Because if you take a look at how the Calgary Flames' point production was labeled out this past season, you'd take a look at it and you'd say, yeah, Johnny Gaudreau was not as big of a star as he was in 2019. Matthew Tkachuk was over there, Elias Lindholm was over there, Sean Monahan was over there, but the thing is, Johnny Gaudreau did not have the up-and-away star-studded lead like he did in 2018-2019. He had 99 points that year, and was up and away the best point producer, best player on the team. This past season, it's been a shuffle between a few younger guys, a few other guys, and Johnny Gaudreau, who hasn't necessarily been playing at the same 99-point caliber that he was at last year. Now, whether or not this is an incentive to trade him is another thing, though. We see stars go over big highs and big lows. But Sean Monahan and Gaudreau are 2 guys who, and Rory Boylen does say it, were indeed in trade rumor talks before the NHL season paused up, once the Calgary Flames started doing a little bit more poorly as the 2019-20 season went on. So, to talk about a trade idea involving Johnny Gaudreau really involves GM Brad Treliving doing one of 2 things pretty much. Either A, he's giving up on the direction of the team in general and signaling a rebuild. That's probably unlikely considering the prominent talent of the young guys they already have, as well as the youth that still thrives in names like Monahan and Gaudreau, etc. Or B, which is the more likely approach, is they're giving up on the direction that Johnny Gaudreau can provide this team. They're saying, okay, he had a really good high, that's great. 99 points, that's great. But the season immediately after that was a low. And that is such a low that we're willing to say, okay, you're out. We're going to capitalize on Matthew Tkachuk. We're going to capitalize on the assets we can get back for a Gaudreau and try to build this team and push forward into the playoffs that way. Now, that's a very weird way to look at it, but that's the only way I can try to rationalize this idea. Your team is a bubble team. Your team isn't in the playoffs. You have a player who was at 99 points last year, and the best thing that you can think about to go forward and make your team better is to trade that player? I don't think it's too difficult for you to understand why that's a weird idea, isn't it? But alas, it's one that we have been faced with over the past few months. Going over Johnny Gaudreau's point log over the past few seasons, the 5'9", 165-pound left winger, who is 26 years old by the way, which to me is just crazy. You can't believe Johnny Gaudreau is now 26. I swear he was always below like 24 every time I always paid attention to him. But his point production in his limited time in the league hasn't necessarily been linear either. He started off with 64 points in 2015, then went up to 78 in 2016, then dropped to 61 in 2017. From there, it was trending upwards. 2018 saw 84 points, 2019 saw 99, but this past season saw him get 58, which is the biggest drop-off he has had in his career thus far. Is it a signal of what's to come, with an eventual decline of a Johnny Gaudreau as he ages towards his mid-20s, late 20s, and eventually the start of his early 30s? I don't think so. I think it's just a bad year. I think it's just one bad year in a career that's seen a very, very good, solid foundation of offense thriving within this player. Whether or not GM Brad Treliving sees that as well is another thing, though. Let's go over to Elliot Friedman's 31 Thoughts back from January of 2020 to talk about Johnny Gaudreau and what Friedman's perspective was on the situation at the time. It's thought number 2 right here. It's very early on in the article. I was in Calgary last week for an upcoming feature. Speaking of vibes, there is an odd one around the Flames. It's not something I heard from Brad Treliving, but there certainly is a sense that changes are coming if they don't finish strong. They're really happy with younger players who have driven the bus. Rasmus Andersson, Dylan Dubé, Mangiapane, but they're not as thrilled with some of their top dogs. The most surprising thing is Johnny Gaudreau on pace for just 44 even-strength points. The winger is not a power play phenomenon. He had 132 points the past 2 seasons, behind only Connor McDavid and Nikita Kucherov, as well as Patrick Kane. That would be Gaudreau's lowest since his rookie season, and they need him at his best. So, with this idea, with the idea that Rory Boylen talks about in his article 5 months later, or 4 months later, yeah, I can't do math. I want to ask another question, and that is, do you think that the possibility of a Gaudreau trade even exists? Because even though I've waxed poetic about how good of a scorer Johnny Gaudreau is and what he can provide to a team, I would be lying if I said that his job is 110% secure, especially if the Calgary Flames lose in the play-in series in that worst-case scenario that we talked about. They lose 3-0, Gaudreau gets 0 points, he does nothing in the series, and ultimately he's seen as a liability. A guy who doesn't do anything. A guy who brings more negative than positive. And overall, when you have assets like that, even though there could be such a strong attachment of positive traits throughout, when you have a GM like Brad Treliving who isn't afraid to make a splash, it could result in a trade. So this video is not something that should make you think that a Johnny Gaudreau trade is going to happen. More so, it's food for thought. It's me feeding the idea on whether or not a Johnny Gaudreau trade could happen. Do I think it's going to happen? You know, I don't think so. I don't think the Calgary Flames are going to lose this play-in series 3-0. I don't think Winnipeg has it in them to sweep them. Could this go 5 games? Maybe. I really wouldn't dismiss the idea. But at the same time, I do think that Calgary does have a chance to win. It's just going to matter on what happens with those top guys in Gaudreau, Monahan, etc. They've been given rest and they've been given a lot of time to train. So when it comes to the entire body of the Calgary Flames, if there's anybody who needs to go out there with a mission to show off that they are better than what people are saying about them, it's Johnny Gaudreau. This guy was a point away from 100 last year, and he has just been suffering from a down year this year. So if there's any person who can benefit from the off time and the comeback, it is Johnny Gaudreau. If he doesn't, though, I wouldn't be surprised if his name was included in trade talks and an eventual trade, but that's just my opinion. Comment down below all you think about this topic. Does Gaudreau get traded, and what factors would increase the likelihood of him getting traded? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.